Here's your host, Danita Bailey.
Well, welcome to School Days, Help for Moms and Dads of School-Aged Kids. I'm Danita Bailey.
And I'm Jantel Jordan.
Today we're going to be talking about the impact of stress and pressure on students. And in the co-hosting chair with us today is Jantel Jordan. Thanks so much for being here.
Thank you.
Well, let me tell them just a little bit about you. Dr. Jantel Jordan, PsyD?
Yeah.
Okay. Is an associate psychologist, postdoctoral fellow at Great Life Counseling Center in Addison, Texas, where she provides child and adolescent individual couples and family therapy. She received her doctorate in clinical psychology in 2018 from the Florida School of Professional Psychology. She completed an APA accredited internship at the University of Texas at Dallas Counseling Center. She has over 10 years of experience working in the mental health field, and she has worked in a variety of settings ranging from community mental health, juvenile drug court, child abuse centers, and public and private schools. So we're so glad to have you here today.
Glad to
and
be
it's
here.
nice to have a co-host again since David's been gone for a little while. So thanks for sitting next to me. So this is a pretty important topic, huh?
Yes, it is. So the information we'll share with you will not only help students, but parents will learn a lot about stress, and that'll be helpful to them as well.
Yeah, we're all stressed. For teens, the most commonly reported sources of stress are school, 83%, getting into a good college or deciding what to do after high school, 69%, and financial concerns for their family, which is 65%. 1 in 4 kids are diagnosed with anxiety disorder by the age of 18. So our summer intern, Maya Dabney, shout out to Maya, who is a high school sophomore, interviewed her friends to find out what they think about stress. So let's hear what they had to say.
It can be different for everybody. For me personally, it has been me procrastinating sometimes and having to turn papers in and do them really quickly the night before, and it's stressful because it's not your best work, but time management really wasn't there. Parents sometimes don't understand that we do get stressed out sometimes, and they'll say that we're not stressed, that we're just overreacting, and that can cause more stress because it's like your parents don't understand, so they're not really helping you, and you're just kind of trying to get through it, but you can't really do anything about it.
I have at least 3 hours of homework each night, football practice, and other activities I do after school. After all of these things, I sometimes get very tired, and it carries over to the next day after not getting enough sleep the night before. Along with this, my mom and teachers have certain standards and are constantly pushing me to do my best and make the best grades I can so that I can get into a good college.
Okay, I personally take AP classes and pre-AP classes, which are a lot harder than the regular classes, and a lot of times I can't go out and have fun and de-stress like they can because I have to work and study on what I'm doing. And even if I'm not studying, I have things out of school that I'm doing, like extracurriculars.
What you do with stress, you have to be able to control it. And whatever you love, you have to use that outlet for stress, manage your comfort zone to control stress. Stress can be a lot of different levels. You have to learn how to control it in order to get better.
Before we go any further, let me just say that it does take a village. If you hear a great parenting tip or nugget of advice, share it with your parent friends. Facebook it, Instagram it, tweet it, link it in, and add the hashtag SchoolDaysShow and hashtag IamSchoolDays. And also, we really want you to be a part of the show. So if you have any questions or comments, give us a call at 214-431-5062. And if you're listening on Facebook Live, on our page at Noggin Foundation, then you can also type in some questions because we are watching you guys. So let's introduce our guest. Jantel, who do we have with us first?
Okay, so first we have Stephanie Springer Threets, and she has 7 years of experience as an elementary counselor and 13 years of experience as a high school counselor. She's currently a counselor at James Bowie High School in Arlington, ISD. So Mrs. Threets holds a Bachelor of Science in English Education from Southern Arkansas University and a Master's of Arts in School Counseling from Louisiana Tech University. She's a member of Leadership Arlington, a nonprofit organization whose mission is focused on the development of the next generation of community leaders. Mrs. Threets is completing certification from Star Commonwealth as a certified clinical trauma practitioner and is also working towards certification as a trust-based relational intervention practitioner. So Mrs. Threets firmly believes that stressed brains can't learn and hopes to educate parents and teachers on strategies aimed at establishing felt safety for students.
All right. Thanks so much for coming.
Oh, thank you for having me. I'm excited.
Oh, cool. With us also, we have Danielle Fitch. She's a professional school counselor at Carter Junior High in Arlington ISD. This school year marks her 22nd year in public education and her 23rd year in education overall. Danielle taught high school English for 19 years while a classroom teacher. She received her MA in reading and literacy and completed postgraduate work in education and administration as well as in school counseling. This is her 4th year in counseling. She has worked as a counselor at both the elementary and junior high levels. And in addition to working with children at school, she has 4 kids of her own. That's a lot.
Oh, yeah.
I have 3, and that's a lot. 1 in elementary school, 1 in junior high, and 2 in high school. So both she and her husband, Aaron, are well versed in juggling the organized chaos involved with supporting your children at all levels as they work their way through school. Yes, you are.
Yes, and it is a juggle for sure.
Absolutely. Well, thank you guys for joining us. Now that we're all acquainted, let's just jump right in. So, what are your thoughts about some of the comments that you heard from the teens that were interviewed? They
All
sound
very
familiar
true.
at all?
Yes, yes, all very true. I was glad to hear one of the students notate the lack of sleep because I think lack of sleep is really, really overlooked. As adults, we overlook it. Kids overlook it. Especially teenagers. You know, teenagers are up all night. They're on their phones.
Right.
They're some are doing homework as they should, but they're up all night doing that, and their bodies are not getting enough sleep. And because of the lack of sleep, well, the brain cannot focus, concentrate. You're irritable. Okay, so how can you manage any external stressors if all of that is going on within your body? The body has to have rest.
Right.
And I think that a lot of our teens, and it may be kind of self-induced, it comes from world expectations, parental expectations, but the expectation that we must go, do, achieve all of the time. And if you're not doing that, then you're not on a pathway to success. You know, I have students who will tell me they feel like, I'm not involved in anything. And we want them to be involved in extracurricular activities and sports and organizations because that helps create a well-rounded person. But we want them to be able to have balance as well. So I was really glad to hear that. I wrote that down.
And if I could piggyback on that, I actually just read an article not too long ago in U.S. News and World Report by a social worker by the name of Katie Hurley, and she talks about this culture of busy that so many of our students and our families face, and this idea that families come to her sharing their stress, sharing their frustration. A lot of it is lack of sleep. And she actually has them take a look at what every member of that family has on their schedule, and then everyone agrees to mark one off because of that. Because whether it's society or school or themselves or their families, everybody's laundry list of things that have to get done is so long that it prohibits that downtime, that rest we need.
Why, in your opinion, do you think we're doing that? We are so overscheduled, and it didn't, when I was growing up, I was involved in sports, but it wasn't at the fast pace and with the amount of things that we're adding onto our plate. What's happened?
I wish I had an answer to that. I do know that in terms of the sports, same thing. When I was growing up, we practiced once a week and we had a game, and that was it.
Right.
And even with, we mentioned I have 4 children, even with my 8-year-old, he goes and he's involved in sports and he's practicing 3 days a week and a game. And that's how their schedules are set up. And so when you do that with multiple children, multiple members of that family, you end up with a schedule that looks like nobody ever goes to bed.
Right.
Yeah, I think I played sports in middle school, high school, college, and definitely can remember I practiced every single day. And sometimes we would practice before school and after school.
2 days, yeah.
Yeah, and so thinking about like if you're doing that, plus you have 3 hours of homework, plus if you're working, which I did work part-time as well, you don't get a lot of sleep.
What are you seeing, because you see adults and children, so what are some of the, would you have any clue why we're overscheduling like this?
Oh, yeah. Like, and when I was listening to the students talk, it was interesting because I've lived in other countries before, and there definitely is a difference as far as like how much you're supposed to do in a day. And I had to learn, like, and train myself to realize it's okay just to have downtime. And one of the things with clients is asking about sleep, because if basic needs are not being met, then you're not going to be able to be productive. And so we have to, like, sleep, eating, and then social support are like the things that we attack first, and then figuring that out, and then we can go and address some of the other things. But sleep is a big thing, and especially like with most high schoolers going into college, like prepping for college, and then the students that are in college prepping for grad school, letting them know you can stay up all night and do all-nighters, and if you don't go to sleep, you won't retain that, because your brain needs that time to be able to sleep and memorize the stuff, like, and actually put it in memory. And so a lot of times when they hear that, they're like, wait, you mean I actually have to go to sleep for this to work? I'm like, yes. That's a big part of it.
We did a whole episode on just sleep and the importance of sleep, and I had 2 high school interns this summer, and talking to them was so eye-opening, because, my kids are younger. My kids are 11 and under, so, they get plenty of sleep. But they just talked about how their kids, their peers are not sleeping. Like, it's not a thing. It's not a big deal at all to stay up until 2 o'clock in the morning. And, like that guy said, he's got 3 hours of homework after school. And then, if you're an athlete, you may not be getting home till 10. And then you got 3 hours of homework after that. And we just don't think it's an important thing.
Right.
And they don't realize that, that it's vital. You're staying up all that time and then kind of wasting a lot of your time, because you're going to lose some of that.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
And thinking about how competitive things are right now in society. So as far as like academically, like, you have to be able to study more or get better grades in order to go to the next level. Whereas college used to be something that not everyone did. Now everyone's doing college, which then means like graduate school is the next thing that you have to go for. So it's like one level up every time.
Yeah.
Right. And I think the key word that you just mentioned is competitive. Our society is so competitive. And I think kids take that on in whatever area, whether it's academic, sports, band. I was a band kid when I was in high school, and I loved it. When I came to Texas and started at James Bowie High School, they're practicing rigorously. It's just band, which is important because I was a band person, but it's a band. And they're good, but they're putting in a lot of time in their extracurricular, a lot of things. They're putting in a lot of time, and it comes from a desire to be successful, whatever you feel like that success is, but we make it external. If I achieve this, if I have this, then I am successful. So we're negating the sensory needs that our bodies have.
And I think at the elementary and junior high level, what I saw a lot too was the competition. That competitiveness wasn't necessarily the child's competitiveness. It was the parents competing against other parents for the best athlete and the best catcher and the best runner and the best singer. And the kids, unfortunately, they feel that and they hear that and they know that. And so their drive becomes less an internal drive to better themselves than it is to make mom and dad proud or be the best for them, because if I do that for them, then maybe things at home will be better. Maybe things at home will be calmer. So when you talk about that overscheduling, a lot of it, at least at those levels, the younger levels, are these kids being scheduled because the parents are saying, I want my kid to be the best.
Exactly.
Therefore, at 7 years old, they're going to play club. Therefore, at 9 years old, they're going to have lessons 4 days a week in this particular instrument that one day they showed an interest in. And there's no allowing that child to be a child.
So some of that is about, is we as parents are making that about ourselves because we're we're competing with other parents, is what you said. There are some articles that I've read, a couple, that talked about, they interviewed kids to find out what they believe their parents valued most. Have you seen any of this? and kindness and being a good person was on there, and then succeeding was on there. And most of the time the kids were saying that more important than being kind and doing good things, my parents want me to succeed and to do well and to get good grades and things like that. So we as parents, of course, want our children to succeed and to do their best and be their best selves. So how do we balance encouraging them in that way with not stressing them out?
Well, then you don't overschedule. You just because I want my child to be the best in basketball does not mean that my child needs to go to basketball practices 3-4 days a week and games on the weekend. Maybe I can find a team that practices twice a week, or there's an organization that really tries to meet parents' needs. They practice and play the game on the same day. So my son and I did that
too.
Yeah.
I-9, is that what that is? Yeah, that's why we chose it.
We did that, yes, and it worked great. Then my son outgrew that a little bit, wanting to be more competitive, and so we're still trying to balance that. And then we need to listen to our children. It's okay for a child to decide, I'm not into this anymore. That's okay, and let what one child is doing right now may have totally nothing to do with what they're going to do later on in their lives, right? So we want our children to learn to be persistent. We want them to have a certain stick-to-itness, but that doesn't mean that they can never decide, I'm not into this anymore. I want to do this. That's part of exploration, right?
Right.
And so we need to allow them the freedom to do that. That doesn't mean I'm going to spend a lot of time paying for violin, then we pay for this, then we pay for that. But we can have those conversations with our children and give them choice. Yeah. It's okay for children to have choice in some things.
Absolutely. With you saying that, I thought about, how do you know then, or how would parents know when a child is not interested in something versus they're just being lazy and don't want to do it?
That's a very good question.
And so thinking about how to be supportive in that way, especially if you're putting money into extracurricular activities or tutoring or whatever it may be.
Because sometimes it becomes a whim and they're like, I know you spent $250 on that, but I'm done.
True.
A lot of that's got to be conversation. That goes back to that choice and letting them have a choice, letting them have a voice, and being willing to sit down with your child and say, we signed you up for football to the tune of $185 or whatever the
Sounds
case may
personal.
be. Yeah. And now you're saying you don't want it, and we understand that. And if that's something you truly don't want the next season, that's wonderful. But you did sign up, and you've committed to this team that you're going to play with.
Right.
And so you are a part of a group now that's working towards success. So you're going to stay with that group.
Right.
But after this, if this is not something you want to do, that's it. And I know that that's hard. And I've worked with some parents over the years that just said, well, he's not going to play anymore. If your child is struggling because there's an issue on the team, I think that makes sense if it's attempted to have been addressed and it hasn't been. But I think there's also another line of it, which is teaching your children that sometimes you make a choice that isn't exactly what you want, but you stick to it till the end.
That's right.
And then when you're done, you're done.
Right.
But it's not going to define you forever, and it doesn't define you at this moment. But you do have to stay committed to support the team that you signed up to be a part of.
Right. And not quit midstream.
Exactly.
Right. I agree. We do have a question from one of our Facebook fans here. He said, how do you know you're doing too much versus giving yourself permission to do too little, i.e. underachieve? Uh-oh. You've stumped them.
You're doing too much versus giving yourself permission
to underachieve?
I think underachieve for me is kind of the sticking point in that question.
Uh-oh.
And not just in terms of understanding what the question is, because I think that we can give ourselves permission to do enough. But I think that just in the way I'm hearing it, and this may not have been its intent, but the way I'm hearing it is if you're giving yourself permission to underachieve, at some point that comes back to you and you start to resent yourself for not having given yourself the opportunity to succeed. But I think it's important to give ourselves the opportunity to say, this is enough.
Kevin, if you're still listening, we might need a little clarification on your question for us to answer it.
So I think what it is, it's saying like trying to find that balance between doing too much and not doing enough. Like, how do you find that middle ground where it is enough? Like, this is a good balance.
Well, Kevin. It's Kevin. Hi. Kevin needs to maybe assess how is he feeling. Okay. How whatever Kevin is doing, whatever you're doing, Kevin, how is this making you feel? Okay. So if you've taken on task A, B, C, and D, okay, take a minute to self-reflect, self-evaluate. Am I overly stressed? Am I not able to sleep? Am I not eating? Is my anxiety, is that increasing with the task A, B, C, and D?
Valid.
If I cut out tasks C and D for a week, whatever, how am I feeling then? That may be just a beginning point for you. But I would really want to know, how are you feeling? Okay, what's your emotional state? And then I am a little concerned about the underachieve, because like Danielle mentioned, the word resentment. Okay, so underachieve is a negative term. And so you may have to reevaluate and prioritize what is success to you, because just because you are not doing everything that everyone else is doing or doing task A through Z does not mean that you are underachieving.
Absolutely.
So that may need to be defined some.
Yeah,
right.
Definitely thinking that language is really important. And even thinking about like when children are communicating with their parents, how would you, because of the power differentials, like how would you, or would you suggest like a child to be able to go to their parents and say, okay, I think I'm doing too much?
Okay.
I think
Great
the way you
question.
said it is perfect.
Right.
I really do. And as a parent, if a child were to come up to me and say that, then it's, okay, let's talk about that. Let's dig a little deeper and find out what you feel like is the too much point. What are the parts that you want to keep and what are the parts you don't? But I think being that honest, and that goes back to, again, what Stephanie was saying about giving your child a voice and a choice, is you have to be, as a parent, willing to hear that. And I think sometimes as parents, we struggle with that because we see the potential and we see what they can accomplish and we know that we can manage our time, and we forget that sometimes these bodies, whether they're 14 or 7 or 18 even, they can't juggle time and manage it the way we can, and nor should they have to.
Right.
So I think being able to accept that as a parent, that my child has come up to me and said, I'm doing too much. This is too much for me. And to be able to take the time to go and investigate that is really important.
And sometimes we as parents are not as open as we should be in those circumstances. And I would say that if there's any children listening, then that might be a great opportunity to talk to your school counselor about that and say, you know, I'm really feeling pressured and feeling stressed. And that's an opportunity for you guys to then reach out to the parents. So
Definitely.
find a parent,
Absolutely.
find a trusted adult that could help talk with that.
Definitely.
I do want to back up a little bit, and I read an article about parents not knowing the symptoms of stress or equating some of the things that they're seeing chronically with their kids as being something that's coming from stress. So what are the symptoms? What should we be looking for?
Oh gosh. Somatic complaints, headaches, digestive issues. Is your child sleeping too much or not getting enough sleep? Aches and pains. You know, our bodies respond to what's going on with us emotionally. And so a headache may not just be a simple headache.
Right.
Okay. Some other things that you may want to look for are avoidance. You know, I heard one of the students mention procrastination. So we take it for granted that that's just what teens do. They all procrastinate. But procrastination can also simply be, I hate to say simply, but a sign of avoidance. You know,
Right.
I'm so overwhelmed.
Absolutely.
I'm so stressed with this task. I'm just going to avoid it.
Right.
Anger too, if we're talking psychological symptoms of it. it's really easy to look at a tween or a teen who is angry and crying and emotional and chalk it up to they're a teenager, that's it, it's an adolescent. They'll get over it, they're having a moment. But a lot of times that is their reaction to the things that they can no longer control, or the things that they feel are out of their control. And really listening to the list that Stephanie gave, physical symptoms, and then when you think about those psychological ones as well, they're no different than what adults do. We respond the same way to stress. We get angry, we get frustrated, we get yelled, we don't feel good. But it's hard to look at a child and see those symptoms for what they are. In that case, we look at them and they're like, and I actually had a student a couple of years ago who stomach aches. It was stomach aches all the time. Big one. And they went to the doctor and just, there was nothing wrong with her, but there was. Because it wasn't in her stomach. Obviously it was in her heart and in her head, and it took a lot of conversation and a lot of love at home and at school for her to be okay after that. But really and truly it was just chalked up to, well, she's just not feeling good.
Yeah. What about different things that we might see academically, like forgetting things? And that's not even just academic. Forgetting where your backpack is. Forgetting where you can't find your shoes.
Right.
Any of those other things.
A dip in grades. I know anecdotally, just from personal experience as well as what I saw even when I was teaching high school, is that they tend to be, a lot of times because of the procrastination, there tends to be a big dip in grades or a change in their grades. If you've got a student that's been, even if they're just pretty even at whatever grade average they tend to get, any change in that is a sign that there's something bothering them and something going on.
Yeah. So what is the difference between stress and anxiety?
Well, so stress is an external, usually brought on by an external factor. You know, we have positive stress and we have really bad negative stress as well. Positive stress might be teenager getting ready for a date, right? That's all exciting and I'm stressed and nervous, but it's positive at the same time. First day of school, my son changed schools this year and he was really, really excited. Okay. Really excited. But on the other hand, I saw some behaviors that also let me know that the body may not be totally handling the positive stress. So he was excited, but I saw some other things. So anxiety, though, is internal because it's a deep dread, apprehension, fear of the future. So I might have some external stress or stress from an external factor. If I manage it well, it eases. Okay, my body comes back into balance. But if I don't manage that well, or if I don't find that balance, I can go into anxiety where I'm constantly worried, constantly worried. So that's, to me, the difference between stress and then how that can move into anxiety.
Yeah, I think that, like, that's how I explain it typically, like, when I'm working with children and, like, teens of, like, it's stress, and then if it goes untreated or anything like that, then it can increase the anxiety, and basically the basis of anxiety is fear. And so us figuring out what is the fear centered around.
So what are kind of the long-term impacts of chronic stress? What are the impacts in general, but then, you know, is this something that can cause maybe health issues in the future?
That's absolutely the health issues. There's the ACE study, and I know, I'm sure, I think you've heard about it, Stephanie. We had talked about it before, and I'm sure you did too. There's a study about childhood experiences and for the adverse childhood experience. I was trying to remember what the A was. And they actually followed these children who had these experiences, these stressors in their lives, and it negatively impacted their health decades down the line, whether it was heart disease or lung disease or whatever the case may be. There were several different areas that they showed this impact on them. It impacted their health, and their life length was shorter because of it as well. So it's not something that's a momentary, like, we'll get through this at 11 and that's it. If it continues and it's not treated, if the tools aren't given, then it is something that carries over and can adversely affect as an adult, even when those stressors are gone.
Okay.
So thinking about, like, it being 3 different levels of stress. So, like, acute, which is like a brief stressor, and then something that may be like a brief episodic, so situational kind of stressor, and then more chronic stress. So something that is more pervasive and long term.
Okay.
Right.
That's great. How does stress affect the developing brain? Oh, because our brains develop until we're
25.
Well, they extended
Well,
it, right?
They did just
They've
extended
extended
it to
last
25,
year.
26.
Yeah.
That's why the
Okay.
insurance
Yeah.
changed too. So why people are able to stay on
Yeah.
their parents' insurance. But that's how they justify everything.
your brain's not formed all the way
But
yet.
you think about a lot of the hormones and the neurotransmitters and everything. It's like your brain is still developing at that point. Like, and so you're still trying to learn out, like, basically what your brain does is trying to figure out shortcuts, basically for everything. And so everything is cause and effect. So A plus B equals C. And so that's what it's doing all the time. And so in these stressful situations, if your brain starts to interpret, okay, well, if I go into a classroom or if I get a paper, then that's automatically stress. Like, it's like quick automatic thoughts that are coming up, which then can produce like the anxiety and things like that.
Right.
Oh, that's fascinating.
I think it's really important for parents, teachers, community members to not just see teenagers, tweens, our kids just as the behavior. So what you asked was a really good question. So much happens within the brain. So if the brain perceives something as stress, whatever that is, specific to that person, because your experience and my experience over the same event can be different, right? But once the brain experiences something as a threat, things change, can change immediately. And if that brain is not brought back into balance and it stays in this chronic state, well, then I'm not thinking anymore. I have no access to that logical reasoning part of my brain. I'm only reacting.
Yes.
I'm only reacting. I was at a workshop last year, and I heard someone explain it like this, and I loved it. So the trauma happens, let's say, and it's chronic. Let's say a child has gone through something chronic, abuse, neglect, whatever it is, but it's chronic. Well, you have a meerkat. So, a meerkat is like a guard, a little animal that looks like a mongoose, and it's like a guard. So, and this is what it actually does. It watches out. It's always looking around and making sure that the other colony members can eat or do whatever they're doing. It's watching for the threat. And so that meerkat is constantly watching. And then you may have a tiger come out. Okay, so here's a tiger. So as soon as that tiger comes out, and what do tigers do? They growl, they're angry, that's how we perceive them. So what flies away? The reasoning part of my brain, my owl, okay, so the owl is wise and thinking, that goes away, and that tiger is on the rampage. So when we have kids who walk into our buildings and they're angry, I can't take that personally as an adult. So that means that I have to be self-aware, right? Because we're human, so it's easy for me to take it personally, right? But I have to be self-aware. And I might have to say, good morning, or smile, because I need to help that student bring their body, their brain back into some sense of balance. And it's relationships and connectedness that helps ease our stress, that helps bring us back into balance. No parent, no teacher is going to punish a child's autonomic nervous system into compliance, right? When we have stress, okay, what the brain kicks on, right? It does. It is going to do what it is created to do to self-protect. You're not going to punish my brain into compliance if I'm experiencing chronic stress. I need strategies to help bring my brain back into balance. And parents need to implement the strategies at home. Then we implement the strategies at school. If the strategies are implemented at school and then the child goes back home to basketball on this day, volleyball on this day, this on this day, and there's no balance, well, that child's brain is still kind of in chaos.
So what you're talking about, like, not to get too nerdy on you all, thinking about with the brain and the frontal lobe, so that's the part that is still developing, but that's the executive functioning. So that's where the decision making and like really piecing things together come. And for children, like teens and late adolescents, like in that period is what has changed now, that's not fully developed. So how as adults we can sit and we can rationalize, we can reason, we can do all those things children are still developing that. Adolescents are still developing that part of their brain. So it's not fully set in place yet. So the frontal lobe, which would be like the front part.
So they can't think.
No, they can think.
No, I don't mean at all.
Yeah. So their executive function, so their reasoning and things like that.
Yes.
So more of the, take a break, like pause, things like that. And so that's what takes more practice and more training and learning.
Right.
So
And it
it's
takes
similar-
some modeling.
It's
too.
similar to that
Exactly.
growth that we see when they're younger
Exactly.
then. That 0 to 5 year block when they're babies. And we're so focused on making sure that they learn all the skills that they need to know at 0 to 5 because there's all this research after 5. They won't be able to learn it anymore. It's no different when they're adolescents then. There is a block of time where we can teach them these tools and show them the strategies that'll be effective. And then at some point, if they haven't learned them and we haven't taught them, there's not a lot of opportunity for them to be able to incorporate that into their day-to-day.
So we have to just pause and reflect on what you just said, because that was genius. I don't use that word lightly either. My husband likes to use that word, and I'm like, that's not genius, but this was. What you just said was that, we have this early stage when we're teaching them all of these skills because they're babies and then they're toddlers and whatnot. We forget sometimes as parents, because the teenage years and these preteen years, they can be so rough on everybody. And we just want you to do what I said. But they're not, their brains aren't completely formed. And it's our responsibility to teach them the skills to cope and to flourish and things like that, just like we were when we were teaching them to walk, teaching them to say please and thank you. We're still doing that even though they're preteens and teens. But that was so good that that's our job right now when they're in this when the stage, to teach them how to deal with these stressors. And I want to talk about that real quick. I do want to say that if you have any questions or comments for our guests, this is a great topic for you to call in and chime in or ask questions. Our number is 214-431-5062, and we're also live on Facebook at Noggin Foundation. That's Noggin, and you can type in your questions there. So what are the things that we can do to teach our kids to cope and ourselves to deal with stressors?
Modeling. Well, you mentioned it. So as a child, I need to see my parent model self-care. I need to see my parent model relaxing. I need to see my parent laughing. Okay? Create a home environment that is somewhat relaxing. Okay? And even though we're experiencing a lot of our own stressors, our kids take that on, right? They do. They take that on. They care about us. And what hurts a parent hurts the child and affects the whole home. But as an adult, I'm more capable of managing my stress, okay? And that will help ease my child's stress as well. So I model that. Model conversating. It's good to sit down and talk with your child, not just how's your day going, but when a child does something that they shouldn't do, you shouldn't have done this is the consequence, and let that be it. I don't have to holler, scream, fuss, nag, because that's not modeling for that child how we handle conflict. So I need to model how to handle conflict. The other thing I always go back to that I really think is so horribly neglected is the sensory needs. Our bodies have sensory needs to relax. Mindfulness is huge right now, right?
Let's talk about that for sure.
Huge buzz term. And so in being mindful, it's in the moment, letting the body experience what is here, what is now, not worrying about what I'm going to do tomorrow or even at home, right here and right now. What am I seeing, hearing, feeling? So that's part of mindfulness. I would love to see that practice within the classrooms, for example. And allow your children or teenagers time to play, get outside. We know that kids are hooked on what now? Video games a lot. They do need to get outside. Constant video games has a horrible negative effect on the brain. Encourage them to get outside, breathe fresh air, vitamin D from the sun. Those things are really, really important.
That mindfulness goes back to the honesty too. If we're going to teach ourselves first, and then our children to be mindful, we've also got to be willing to be honest with ourselves and allow our kids to be honest, because being mindful doesn't mean being happy. And actually, I ran a mindfulness group at the elementary school that I was a counselor at, and it was, I should say I facilitated. They kind of ran me, actually. But it was really interesting because a lot of the students who came in to do that, and we talked about being in the present, being in the moment, accepting where we are now. One of them, this is several years back, but one of them, I very distinctly remember sharing that was the first time that she had been allowed to be angry. She wasn't allowed to be angry at home because what she was told is you have a house and you've got this and you've got this. So I can't be angry. And so we talked about, it's not a matter of how you're feeling right now being bad. It's what you're doing with it. So let's be okay being angry. And then let's work on some things we can do to make the next moment better and to make the moment after that better. But it's okay to feel that way. And I think sometimes as adults, we are so busy just running, or we don't allow ourselves to feel that when we see our children feeling or our students feeling, we can't allow that because it's not okay. But I think what you said before, though, Stephanie, about that behavior being attached to something that they're feeling inside, that is a huge thing, too, as being a mindful adult and working with these kids, is we do have to realize that their behaviors are stemming from whatever's going on internally, for better or for worse. And so if we get to the root of it, then the behavior takes care of itself a lot of the time.
All right. Yeah, I really like that. I think in my work, I know I use a lot of mindfulness and like meditation. And so with mindfulness, just thinking about engaging the five senses, like even doing mindful eating, like, because I think sometimes we just go and go and go, but really taking a moment. What do you smell? What do you see? What do you feel? What do you taste? Like really slowing things down. That's the hardest part, I think. And with us talking about stress is slowing down. With mindfulness and meditation, it's forcing yourself to slow down, like ground yourself in the moment. And sometimes I think that there is this misconception that your brain has to be like completely empty, like there can't be any thoughts. And I tell people all the time, no, you're gonna have thoughts, your brain's gonna go everywhere. It's just acknowledging, okay, I'm thinking, and then centering yourself even back to your breath.
That's so difficult for me. I am a multitasker. I'll watch a movie and be Facebooking and be answering emails and all of those things. But I do love to eat, so I would love to do mindful eating.
And so think about in multitasking, there is research. You can multitask, but thinking the percentage of like your productivity level is different across all the tasks. So it's not going to be 100% to all those tasks. It may still be adequate enough, but it's not going to be the same percentage as if you were just focusing on one task.
Right.
Yeah. Okay. So teachers set the environment and the tone for the classroom. If the teacher is stressed out and worried, then the kids will be. How do schools encourage teacher self-care when it comes to stress?
We have at Bowie, one of the counselors is a certified yoga instructor.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
And so she offers yoga after school, for the staff. We also have, she called it the Lotus Room. She changed it this year. I can't remember what it is, but we have a small room that she has set up beautifully.
Like a relaxation
very
room?
relaxing.
Okay.
Staff can go there to relax. And we also schedule students who may need the benefit of that room and relaxing and just some mindfulness. We can schedule them to go in as well with the yoga instructor. We have a wonderful principal who was also her wonderful principal.
Just a few years ago.
I can honestly say he is extremely personable. In being so personable, our staff seems so relaxed, happy, so relationships are so key. So he has built a culture of relationships on campus. Did you find the same?
That's what I didn't work with Mr. Lizardo. He was there the year before that I got to Carter. But I've heard about him, and I will say that Claudia Herrera, who is my current principal at Carter, that is our drive. It is all about the relationships, whether it's between and among the adults or between and among the adults to the students and the students to students, because it's the positive relationships that drive the success of any school. So with respect to the self-care, our families come first,
Yes.
and that's supported.
Yes.
Our relationships come first. There's an open door policy. If there's ever anything going on or need to talk or need a break, there's no questions asked. We can go ahead and do it. I think it's hard because our school days are so busy as educators. I remember as a classroom teacher, it was nonstop all day long. So it's hard to remember to do that. So it's wonderful when an administrative team supports you, taking time for you and for your family.
Right. And, so the busyness of what we have to do day in and day out
Mm-hmm.
and what the teachers have to do and administrators, that doesn't go away. That's there.
Yep.
But because relationships is so stressed, everyone has a sense of feeling empowered and valued. Within each department, I can see relationships, positive relationships are built. I have wonderful co-counselors. We have a fabulous English teacher who did a workshop and really stressed relationships, building relationships and friendships with one another. That helps us. We need those connections and we need that belonging, and so do kids. Kids need that.
And so moving away from teachers and thinking about you all as counselors, so how do school counselors help manage the mental health issues in the schools? And can and do you all diagnose?
No, we leave that to you.
Yes, yes.
We know I live. You are not going to see us.
I think sometimes that is a misconception that a lot of parents or guardians may have about, like, if my child goes to a counselor, they're going to get diagnosed with something. And so just you all explaining kind of what it is that you do as counselors.
No, you're absolutely right. And that's actually something I was up against at the elementary schools. There were a lot of parents, elementary more so than junior high, but a lot of parents were like, no, you are not to go see her ever. And so it was lots of conversation with parents, and then just lots of being very verbal and very public about what does happen. So it's not a matter of diagnosing. It's not a matter of this is what you've got and this is how it can be treated. We do a lot of very brief therapy, solution focused. And if it's something that we can see as professionals is beyond the scope of what we can manage in a school day, or even in the few minutes that we get to see our several hundred students, because we do, both of us have caseloads of 300-ish students, then we have resources upon resources that we can refer out to, and lots of contacts in the community where if a student we really feel needs more than what we can offer, we can absolutely get them in touch with them and get their parents involved and get their parents in touch with who they need to reach out to.
And so is what a child says during a session with a counselor confidential? Is that, like, and not just confidential, like, as far as with their parents, but thinking about with teachers, administration, like, so do they feel like if I come in this space, then it's just between me and you, or do you all as, like, employees have to communicate that to other people?
No, I think we are very good about sharing with our students. It's safe here, and I know I've got several signs posted, and I share this with any student who comes in to speak with me, that whatever you say in here stays in here. I cannot share with anyone unless you're going to hurt yourself.
Yes.
Somebody's hurting you, or you're going to hurt somebody else. But other than that, it's here. It's kind of like Las Vegas. But I do know that we at least I know I have in the last couple years faced a lot of challenges with the adults in the building because they want to know, and not because they're being intrusive or they're being mean. They're concerned about their babies, and they want to make sure they're okay. So that's kind of a fine line there with what we can and cannot share. And so what I've pretty much done is said it's a blanket, he or she is okay, or this is the support we're going to need from you to help.
Right. And I let students know, or I ask students, I don't let them know, I ask them, is it okay for me to reach out to Mrs. Such and Such and tell them what you need? Tell them what will help you within the classroom without divulging what's going on. Sometimes I get yes. Most times I get a yes. Sometimes I have received a no. They don't want anything mentioned, and I respect that. So it's only if the child is going to hurt himself or someone else, or someone's hurting the student, that we have to reach out.
I do not want to end this episode without talking about study drugs. I listened to NPR and heard a lot about this, and then I've also talked to, again, my interns give me a whole lot of information about what's going on in the high schools, and they talked about study drugs. So what is that?
Well, there's, stimulants, Adderall, Concerta, Ritalin, Vyvanse. I don't know if students still rely on the energy drinks, the monster drinks. There is a organization, Tarrant County Challenge. You heard of that? Tarrant County. So, and they partner with the district, and every other year they do a survey. And it's a random survey. So it's 7th graders, 10th graders, 12th graders across the district. And what they're trying to assess is drug usage. I think around maybe 4.9% of seniors across the district, not every senior, randomly surveyed, said that they had used some prescription drugs
That weren't theirs.
that were not theirs
Correct.
at someone's house. Maybe around 2.5% of 7th graders said the same thing. So yes, kids are using those things to, get the feeling that they want to get internally, to stay up and study and not sleep so they can get things accomplished. And we have on our campus a drug interventionist, and he works with students whom we and administrators refer to him on drugs and alcohol.
So my interns were telling me that it is rampant in schools, and that's not across the board and may not be in your school, but they were saying that it is not a big deal at all that kids are either offering my Adderall or my Ritalin, whatever my ADHD drug, or they're selling them pretty regularly so that they can do what you're talking about, stay up late, or so that they can focus better. Yeah. So have you seen that as being an issue either in your school or in schools that people that work in?
I would say at the level that I'm at junior high, that is
right, you're in middle
not
school.
that's not
Yeah.
something I've heard about frequently. I have heard it, but I have heard it more frequently from the students I know who attend high school. Not just in our district. I'll go ahead, just let me clarify, not just in Arlington, in other districts as well.
Right.
But it's not something, going back, that study is really interesting. I would like to find out more about that, because my guess would be that if you control for the fact that it's based on self-report, that there's probably more kids in that
there
room.
are.
Yeah.
And it wasn't, every
Right.
7th grader, 10th grader, and 12th grader.
But you're right. I mean, they don't consider it a big deal because it's so frequently prescribed and it's so frequently used. And even students that have never had it in their household for any reason, they know what it is and they know what it does. And it's just, sure.
Or they're taking their parents' prescriptions and selling them on, I would say, the black market, but it's not even the black market. It's just right out in the open. And what I did not realize, and I think a lot of kids don't realize, is that it's illegal.
Yeah.
You can go to jail for this.
Yes.
And actually, these types of drugs are considered Schedule II controlled substances. Maybe you can probably talk more to that.
So thinking about, they are a stimulant. And so a lot of the chemical makeup of the drugs, so a lot of the prescriptions that are used for ADHD, ADD, things like that, would be this equivalent to meth or heroin,
Cocaine.
like the way that they react in your brain. So thinking about when you look at the chemical composition of it, so if you looked at it, it would be different, but how the receptors in your brain perceive it is the same. It gives you that same kind of euphoria, that same kind of high.
And addiction.
Yes.
Yeah. That's
So
the other
thinking
issue.
about the misuse part, and I think that that's something that a lot of people don't understand, especially children. It's like, oh, well, the doctor prescribes it, so it can't be that bad.
Exactly.
And them not really realizing, okay, the doctor prescribes it, but it's supposed to be used as the doctor prescribed
Right.
for whatever the presenting problem is,
Right.
and not just sharing. Yes, I tell people all the time, because this goes on even college, this goes on to adults in different professions and thinking of things like that. So thinking about, everybody could benefit probably from a stimulant, to be more productive, but that doesn't mean that everybody needs a stimulant.
Right.
So thinking about, and so some of that is the overdoing, like in what we were talking about earlier of like pushing students to do more and do more and do more. And so if someone feels like, okay, well, this person next to me is able to do all this stuff in 2 hours and I'm not able to, well, maybe I just need a little boost. And I know somebody else has Adderall or has Vyvanse or has Ritalin. Okay, I'll take that so that I can keep up with you.
Yeah. And you could already be taking something
Exactly.
that does not mix well with.
No.
And that's something else. Even with, I'm glad you brought up caffeine, because caffeine is another thing that is, we actually diagnose substances. Like that's one of the things that can be misused, and not knowing the long-term impact that those things can have on your organs. So like your liver, your heart, you're like, different parts of your body like that. And I think a lot of people don't think long-term use.
Especially
and the impact.
teenagers.
Yes.
Right.
And thinking about mixing caffeine plus like a stimulant and
Or
what that does to your
God
heart.
forbid Red Bull plus
Right.
stimulant or something like that.
Right.
And actually, depending on the amount that you're caught with, if you're caught at school, you're caught on the street, you can face between 1 and 20 years, 20 years in prison and fines up to $10,000.
Right.
So it is a thing, even though
Right.
they don't realize it. It can be very serious.
Right.
That is, and even if it doesn't legally go that far, I know that there's a student code of conduct in any district. That is something that those students, and I've seen this happen over the years, they're surprised that they receive an alternative education placement, but it's a prescription. I don't understand why it's a problem, but it is, but because of what it is. And so, yeah, there's some major ramifications for having that on campus as well, in addition to whatever consequences there are legally.
Right. And the biggest one is you could die.
Exactly.
You could die. It's not worth it.
Yeah.
It's not worth it.
Man, there are so many more things I wanted to get into. We just are completely out of time. But thank you guys, all three of you, so much for joining us. This was a great episode. We will probably have to do another one because we didn't talk about social media,
that's an episode all by
cyberbullying,
itself.
and we've done an episode on social media, but social media causing stress and anxiety, and bullying, and there's just so many other things we could have talked about. But alas, we only have 1 hour. So, thanks again for the great conversation.
Thank you for having us.
Yeah, we always want to talk about at the end here a little bit that's going on with Noggin Educational Foundation. So save the date for 9/19/19. That's North Texas Giving Day, and it's an 18-hour online giving event designed to empower every person to give back to their community by supporting North Texas nonprofits that they care about. So each year, Noggin receives support from cities all over the U.S., and because of our show, thankfully, we have listeners from all over the globe. So we use this money collected on North Texas Giving Day to fund our free tutoring program. This year, we have already been able to give to 13 students because of North Texas Giving Day last year, and we already have so many more students that are already on the waiting room. So we want to make a waiting list. They're in the waiting room for tutoring. So we want to make room for so many more. This year, we need 334 people to give just $30. So what we'll do is we'll keep you posted on our progress, and you can actually start scheduling your giving for North Texas Giving Day on September 9th. And North Texas Giving Day is actually the 19th, and that's my birthday.
No way, it's mine too.
Is it? No way. That's awesome. We'll have to celebrate together somehow. I'll mention this more as we get closer, and details will be on our website, of course, just putting a little bug in your ear. I also wanted to mention that it's the beginning of school, so this is a great time to start goal setting with your child. We have our SMART Goals and Growth Mindset Toolkit, which is a free download, and it's on our website as schooldaystoshow.com under resources. Next week, we're going to play one of our best of school days shows. Since it's the beginning of the school year, many parents are setting up ARDs at school to put in place or revise their child's IEP or 504 plan. So next week, join us for the replay of one of our first shows, How to Obtain Services and Accommodations at School. Our guests were behavioral therapist Rondi Allen and Suzanne Scott, who heads the special education department at a high school in the Dallas-Fort Worth area. So you're going to want to make sure that your parent friends watch that next week, especially if you're working on revising your 504 or your IEP. As always, head to our website, schooldayshow.com, for more information. And remember, you don't ever have to miss a show. Find us on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Play Music, and pretty much anywhere that you listen to your favorite podcasts. And don't forget to follow us on Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter at Noggin Foundation. That's NOGGIN. And do you YouTube? You can find episodes of School Days and other videos featuring the fun educational programs that we offer with Noggin on our YouTube channel. So search for Noggin Educational Foundation. And last but not least, we always want to say at the end that David and I are parenting by grace. We depend on God to give us the wisdom and strength we need to raise our kids into flourishing adults. And if you would like to know more about that, please feel free to email me at info@schooldaysshow.com. Have a great week.
School Days is sponsored by Noggin Educational Foundation. At Noggin, we provide free educational resources to students from low-income families and support to their parents like the preceding broadcast. School Days is made possible by the generosity of listeners just like you. Please consider donating to Noggin at Noggin, Noggin, foundation.org.
Share your voice, opinions, creativity, ideas, music, fbrn.us.